If you're watching this video, you probably already know what Geometry Dash is. But if you don't, I'm going to spend a little time on explaining its mechanics before going into depth about my opinions on the game. So basically, this is you, and this is a spike. Your objective? Don't die. It's quite simple. All you have to do is jump over spikes, avoid obstacles, and reach the end of the level. However, there's a twist. The game features several different game modes that change what your icon does. The UFO allows you to jump midair, the ship allows you to fly, the ball allows you to change gravity, the spider changes gravity quickly, the wave moves like the ship but linearly, the robot allows you to jump for longer, and the swing copter allows you to change gravity midair. With all these in mind, the possibilities for the obstacles you can encounter becomes endless, especially when combined with other gameplay modifications that I'm not going to bother listing. Now, the game comes pre-packed with 23 levels made by the creator of the game himself, but it's likely that you beat them all relatively quickly, so you'll likely want to play one of the tens of thousands of community created levels. Here's where things get interesting, as not only is Geometry Dash's level creator incredibly versatile, but so are its players. In fact, there are several lists maintained by members of the community in order to rank the levels by difficulty, and every day players are pushing to break the limits of the most difficult level of speeding, but we'll talk about that later. While Geometry Dash is often regarded for its incredible difficulty, I'd like to discuss what could potentially be considered a more abstract idea. Should we consider Geometry Dash an artistic medium? Now hear me out. First we have to establish a definition of art. This is probably one of the most hotly debated topics aside from like politics, but I'm going to be rash and put my own opinion into the mix. Art is, as simply as possible, an expression of humanity. If a human made it, it can be considered art. Now does that mean everything humans have made is art? That's where subjectiveness comes into play. One could see a brick wall and say yes, while another can say no. But I think with something like a Geometry Dash level, we can be a little more divisive. Another slightly less objective way of determining if something is art is how well it corresponds to the rules of composition, which includes but is not limited to rhythm, unity, movement, and balance, as well as how well the art uses other aspects of art, like color theory. And arguably, a lot of GD levels do meet these requirements. For example, my personal favorite level, White Space by Zendergame, obviously uses contrast in order to emphasize the elements later in the level, while also purposely keeping the beginning dull and near monotone to help emphasize the state of confusion or unknowing. Likewise, Reanimate by Moore applies color theory in the theming of the level, opting for a hellish mood, which would only be possible by the use of brutal reds and blacks. Okay. So if Geometry Dash levels can be considered art via both the fact they are created by a human, and thus modes of human expression, and that they follow the rules of basic artistic composition, I think it's pretty safe to say at least some of them can be considered art. But does that make the game itself an artistic medium? Not necessarily. An artistic medium is defined as the material required to make art, so something say like a clay, a canvas, colored pencils, etc. The question here is whether or not Geometry Dash is different enough from other mediums to be considered one of its own. Now, Geometry Dash is different from a typical digital canvas. You aren't given some brush tools and the ability to draw in the editor. Instead, the game gives you a plethora of hundreds of different parts you can assemble to make a level. I'd say this differentiates it enough from typical drawing and painting mediums, and the only other major medium you can compare Geometry Dash to is film. Whether that be something like a movie or a YouTube video, Geometry Dash levels are displayed in a sequence of frames. Again though, it does have a major difference from what would be considered typical of this medium. Most Geometry Dash levels are interactive. You're playing the art. Each player's experience of each level is different and not just on a mental level. Because you can take different paths and different click times, etc. So Geometry Dash is probably its own medium, but does it actually bring anything new to the table? Why not just draw an animation instead of having to watch an icon dodge obstacles made of hundreds of smaller parts? This question isn't really an easy one, but I think it's the way you can play Geometry Dash levels. The natural progression of traveling through the art piece provides an experience you don't really see in a lot of other mediums. It gives the level a story, regardless of whether or not the creator was aware of it. Not only that, but the challenge of making levels look unique from others while using the exact same toolset gives a lot of levels a sense of uniqueness you don't really see in other mediums because of how much it's incentivized. Levels can imitate both still art and video. You can combine them into an interactive experience you don't really get elsewhere, and is conveniently shared to you in for the price of $5 and access to the internet. And I'm glad to see Geometry Dash creators taking full advantage of the unique medium the game provides. In fact, there's so much variety from one level to another. The community has established its own system of artistic styles. There's modern, which is kind of misleading because it doesn't necessarily mean modern art, instead of referencing the use of flat colors, less detail, and often unique backgrounds. Core, which focuses on extremely detailed block design and heavy glow. Realistic, which focuses on making deco as realistic as possible, and a bunch more. Again, these are kind of like pseudo styles, so like you can't find a full list of them anywhere. How many attempts did it take to beat your first Geometry Dash level? 1? 50? 100? Through the years, Geometry Dash has gained a reputation for being incredibly difficult due to a multitude of factors. Firstly, there are no checkpoints in levels. If you die, you're sent to the start and you have to try to beat the level over again. And secondly, the core gameplay is easy to learn, but hard to master. While jumping over a single spike may be easy, jumping over 2 is a little harder, jumping over 3 is even more so. Given the flexibility of the editor, creators have managed to put together thousands of levels, and a not so negligible portion of these are pretty difficult. In fact, creators and players try their best to push the boundaries of the game's difficulty at every opportunity. Let me introduce you to the Pointer Crate Demon List. While it's not the only one of its kind, it is one of the most popular. It's used to rank the most difficult levels ever beaten in the game. At the time of recording, Tidal Wave by Onilink sits at the top. But this chapter isn't about the levels. It's about the dedication it takes to beat them. How willing are you to give up after you fail? Maybe you'll throw in 1 or 2 attempts before calling it quits. Maybe more with an actual video game. Tidal Wave took its verifier Zoink 49,534 attempts to beat. Tidal Wave is around 3 minutes long. And given that 49,533 of those attempts didn't make it through all 3 minutes of the level, it's safe to say Zoink spent a lot of time seeing the same parts over and over and over. Yet, he persisted. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Even though Tidal Wave is the most difficult level on the Demon List, there are definitely levels that people have spent more attempts on. Let's look at Tartarus, which, while it was once considered the most difficult level in the game, it now sits at number 34 on the list. It took its verifier Dolphy 61,746 attempts. Limbo, a rather recent level that sits at number 16, took Bgram 109,490 attempts to beat. And it took Trick 234,000 attempts to verify Firework, currently 11 on the Demon List. If you thought your 576 attempts on Club Step was a lot, consider 234,000 attempts on a single level in a $5 mobile game. The sheer amount of dedication that Geometry Dash players have is incredible. I think it's one of the biggest representations of the power of the human perseverance, a testament to mind over matter. And the single most attempts on a Geometry Dash level belongs to a player called Nifty Boy, who has an incredible count of 640,000 attempts on Firework. I can't even comprehend the dedication required for that. So, is Geometry Dash more than just a cheap mobile game you can play when you're bored? I'd say so. What it enables its creators and players to do isn't something you see often, and there are many levels in this game I'd consider putting on display in an art gallery. Plus, the amount of dedication some players put into a single level is unbelievable. Regardless of whether or not Geometry Dash really means anything outside of its own sphere, I think it is at least a remarkable testament to what a community of dedicated creators and players can do. Thanks for watching.